Hello and welcome. It is time for round 8 of Grand Prix Toronto. Number 20 ranked Mike Segrist is on the left of your screen, the reigning player of the year. So far, so good at this tournament for him. He is 7-0, and he's now paired up against Brian Larter.
And it looks like we have a matchup of green-white tokens versus green-white tokens on our hands. Mike Segrist is running back the deck that Steve Rubin used to win the Pro Tour last weekend.
Sure.
Featuring just powerful cards in green and white. The Dream Curve of Hangerback Walker into Nissa, into Gideon, that is still alive. It looks like Brian Larter is on the exact same list.
Now, is this a deck that you think is still positioned well in Standard, even though it won the Pro Tour last week?
It had an impressive win percentage of about 71% in the Swiss rounds.
Oh, it was definitely a great call for last week, for sure. And Mike was right there on team face-to-face, crushing it.
So even if it may not be as well positioned for this weekend, because players now know about it, can tweak their decks and so on, it is probably still powerful enough. I do expect many players to get ready for this type of deck with some small card tweaks ranging from, say, Dragonlord Silumgar, that's pretty well positioned against green-white tokens, or all kinds of other cards, maybe some decks that don't rely as heavily on language, but rather on other cards to take control. But still, it is a powerful deck that particularly excels against all the decks that people played, like the red-green goggles deck, in order to beat on Band Company and humans.
Brian Larter actually lists, as the deck designer of his deck, Rubin.
Fair enough.
He tweaked it a little bit, though. He does not have any of the one-drops. The Thraben Inspectors, which I know that the face-to-face guys also mostly pulled from the deck. He's got 4 Stasis Snares main, is his twist.
Stasis Snare is a powerful removal spell, a bit weak to Dromoka's command, but when you have Oath of Nissa to protect it, it's fine. As for the game at the moment, both players are just developing their boards with Sylvan Advocates on both sides of the board. Segrist is, possibly leveling up a Hangerback Walker. Larter is making some tokens with Nissa. The game is pretty close at this point, with both players just vying for some board superiority.
Larter apparently got a Westville Abbey in his pre-release deck.
Sweet. It's a good card to open in Limited as well.
Sure.
On the other hand, Larter does not have access to white mana. His configuration of 3 forests and the Westville Abbey does not allow him to cast any of the white cards in his hand. So if you take that into account, then it's fair to say that Mike Segrist is ahead in this game so far. Again, Nissa might actually go ultimate. It's -7 to draw a bunch of cards.
And gain a bunch of life.
When you're at 20, that's not so important, but
Yeah,
you're right.
I'm mostly kidding.
A small benefit, nevertheless.
X is the number of lands you control at the time you ultimate her.
Yep. Mike has Archangel Avacyn in hand. That can certainly help to start attack the Nissa or do all kinds of other work, especially as long as Brian does not find a white source to be able to answer it. Interesting. So Mike attacks with Sylvan Advocate here. Brian had the option of actually blocking with his own Sylvan Advocate. In that case, they might have just bounced off of each other. But Brian was possibly scared of a Dromoka's command that puts an additional counter on the Sylvan Advocate to help it win combat, and therefore just decided to chum block with a plant token.
Wow, grip full of white cards for Brian Larter.
But he did draw a white source, it looked like. There is Canopy Vista. That is a huge draw for Brian Larter here.
All right, game on. Now what?
Well, for one, it allows Brian to answer the Archangel Avacyn that he can kind of sniff out at this point by leveling up his Hangerback Walker to a 3/3 and then Dromoka's command, put an additional counter on there and then fight the 4/4 Hangerback Walker with the Archangel Avacyn. So we might just be seeing that here. Because Brian does not want that Archangel Avacyn to stick around on the other side of the table. And he would like to keep his Nissa around.
Nice. Yeah, all that is as a response to the indestructibility trigger.
Yes.
White mana just in time for Brian Larter.
Yeah, it should not have come one turn later.
Mike Segrist looking for his 4th Grand Prix top 8 this weekend. He's got 2 wins in his 3 top 8s. DC and Montreal.
So there was a 6 land, meaning that Sylvan Advocate is now a 4/5. Brian does not really have any good block, so the chump block with a plant token definitely makes sense here. There we see a sweet interaction. This is always awesome to watch. Archangel Avacyn, and then a Hangerback Walker for 0 to transform it. Not only will it allow Mike Segrist to get rid of Brian's board of creatures, but he can also deal 3 damage to Nissa to make sure that the Planeswalker won't go ultimate on this turn, if Mike so pleases.
Pretty sweet. Of course, his creatures do take the damage too. Not even clear that's bad, as Hangerback turns into 3 Thopters.
This is such an incredible swing. It looked like Brian was getting ahead in this game, but Archangel Avacyn transforming. Wow.
One, two, three, four, 5.
Yeah, Brian has Secure the Waste in hand. Now, typically, you want to play that instant at, well, the end of your opponent's turn. But when you have a sorcery speed ability like the pump from Nissa, you may want to play it on your own turn. Brian decides against it. Not sure why. He's probably going to lose that Nissa to an attack from all of the flyers. And now he hasn't really gotten any value out of the Nissa. Making a bunch of 2/2 tokens might have been more valuable.
Evolutionary Leap from Mike. That's still a 1 of?
It is still a 1 of those, although he has the 2nd copy in his sideboard. Hey, it's a great way to dig for another Archangel Avacyn. And then transform it once you get it. That is a powerful play pattern in this matchup.
There is the Secure the Wastes.
It's a bunch of 1/1s, but none of them have flying. And Brian seems to be stuck with a bunch of double white cards in hand. No second white source.
Stasis Snare and a Gideon.
Really behind. If Brian would have drawn a white source here, he could have cast the Stasis Snare in order to take out the Avacyn the Purifier. At least stem the bleeding a little bit. But with that Evolutionary Leap, Mike Segrist kind of has the late game locked up as well. The only thing that Mike might have to worry about is that Westville Abbey on Brian's side of the board. Brian just needs 1 more land in order to activate the Westville Abbey, which may have also been the reason why he actually activated Nissa for the plant token rather than boosting his tokens. If he just goes for the Westville Abbey, transform into Ormondal plan.
That makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what he was thinking. 4 2/2s, not as good as 5 small creatures, where Westville Abbey is concerned. Yeah, and Siggy sees it too. The only way he's losing is to that Ormondal. So Secure the Waste takes out all the 1/1 soldier tokens.
Yeah, and doesn't even leave any clues behind.
And Mike Segrist takes a 1-0 lead. Boy, the Magic Online Championship should be a fun tournament coming up here, May 13 to 15.
Yep.
There's a bunch of big names in that one, including Mike Segrist, right?
He is? Well, it should be fun.
Pretty sure.
All right. Yeah, that's going to be a very high-profile event, so don't miss that. May 13 to 15. Mike actually wrote an article on his deck, and he also specified some ideas on how to sideboard. He mentioned that in one round against a teammate that he decided that the matchup was all about the Planeswalkers and about Archangel Avacyn. So while boarding, what he did was to cut all of his Sylvan Advocates, all of his Trabant Inspectors, board in the second evolutionary leap.
Okay.
So that the evolutionary leap allows you to repeatedly sacrifice some tokens in order to find, well, Hangerback Walker or Archangel Avacyn. Set up that combo. If you indeed believe that the matchup is about these Planeswalkers and Archangel Avacyn, that seems like a pretty powerful sideboard strategy. We'll see if he indeed goes with that route still here.
Is this a Tragic Arrogance matchup?
It probably is. Tragic Arrogance was put in the board of this deck mostly against human decks as well as Band Company decks. But it also seems quite decent in this matchup. You can set up some interesting sequences where, for example, the opponent has a board filled with Planeswalkers and creatures. And then you cast Tragic Arrogance, say, okay, you can keep this tapped token and this Planeswalker here. I keep my huge, say, Sylvan Advocate, and then I attack your Planeswalker, and suddenly the game has switched around. I would board that one in. You can't really overload on 5 drops when you already have so many Archangel Avacyns. You may not want all the Tragic Arrogances, but still a powerful card to have access to. Alternatively, Secure the Waste is also a card that can decide this matchup, not only due to the interaction with Nissa or Gideon boost, but also, as we saw in the previous game, it can get you really close to transforming Westville Abbey into Ormondal.
Right.
Now, there are still some answers to an Ormondal, like Declaration in Stone or Stasis Snare, but if your opponent doesn't have any...
Clip Wings here? Their sideboards are very similar. Something about both copying off the guy who won the Pro Tour. I think Mike comes by it honest. Maybe Brian comes by it honest too, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, Clipwings is an interesting one. On the one hand, if you expect that the matchup is about Archangel Avacyn or potentially the Ormondal, yeah, you can board it in as an answer to those plans.
Yeah, they both have 2 Clip Wings on the board.
On the other hand, it is kind of a narrow card. It only does something against, say, 6 cards in the opposing deck, so there is a definite risk of having it in your hand and your opponent not having any flyers and just building a big board with like Gideon and Nissa, and you're like, well, I have this Clip Wings, that doesn't do anything. You also have to find cards
there might be another
to cut
card
from your deck.
You think I might have brought in the one Linvala the Preserver from the sideboard?
That is an excellent top-end card to bring in for this matchup as well. And perhaps another reason for bringing in that Clip Wings. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, fair enough. These decks might just transform into completely different decks, taking out all the small creatures like the like the Sylvan Advocates.
The curve starts at Avacyn and goes up to Ormondal.
Yeah, possibly. It's just Haymaker against Haymaker if that is indeed the route towards sideboarding that they choose. It's also dangerous to go into that route, right? If you board up to all creature removal spells as well as 5 drops and huge impactful cards, there's still the risk of losing to an opponent who goes, well, 1 drop into 2 drop into 3 drop, attack you for a bunch. Well, there we see it, Sylvan Advocate, still in the deck. So it looks like these players have not gone for the sideboard strategies that we were discussing as an option.
Nothing but Sylvan Advocates.
Not even trying to go for the attack. Pretty sure that Mike Segrist would have snap blocked and put his own Sylvan Advocate in front of the other one. But there's always no downside in making the attack here. Not gonna work against Player of the Year Mike Segrist.
First Planeswalker for Siggy. Nissa brings a plant with her. Brian says, I'll see your Nissa. I'll raise you a Gideon. Reaches immediately for the emblem. So his Sylvan Advocates are now 3/4s.
That is quite a change because it means that his own Sylvan Advocates can attack into the Sylvan Advocate on Mike's side of the board. If Brian would have just activated Gideon to make a Knight token, well, first off, that 2/2 wouldn't do all that much against an opposing Sylvan Advocate. And secondly, it would mean that Brian's Sylvan Advocate would still be blocked.
Declaration hits
That
both Sylvan Advocates.
That is huge.
Big swing.
That's your 2-mana Maelstrom Pearls right there. And giving the opponent a bunch of clues is not a huge issue when you still have the board advantage.
Yep.
I mean, the opponent can now sacrifice some clues to draw cards, but in the meantime, you're ticking up Nissa to get additional tokens onto the battlefield.
New Gideon, which makes 3/3s.
I mean, that's fine, but that Gideon is likely not gonna stick around on the battlefield for too long. Mike has Dromoka's Command in hand.
Yeah.
He has the option of using it to boost a Sylvan Advocate, fight with the Knight token, and then
Which sounds pretty good.
then on his own turn, pump his creatures with Nissa and then attack Gideon to get it off the table right away. Mike does lose his own Nissa in the process if he goes for that route.
I was wondering if that's worth it. I don't think he has another way to get that last point. So yeah, he does. Nissa goes down. He's behind a couple +1/+1 counters. And now the Advocate can beat up Gideon.
Yeah, if Brian had nothing else, then maybe it could be worth plussing Nissa for a turn, then minusing on the next turn, because then you still have Nissa around, but it's super risky. If Brian would play some cards here on this turn to protect his Gideon, you may fall too far behind. So I like the play from Mike here, just keeping the board on Brian's side clear.
Brian gets to pass. He's going to use his mana for clues, right? That's why he's left 5 mana untapped and done nothing?
Yeah, I don't think Mike is going to fall for that. Then again, Mike can just attack with the Sylvan Advocate, even if Brian has the Archangel Avacyn that his 5 mana obviously represents. It's not the end of the world.
So he can eat the plant token, or he can soak up what is now 6 damage from Sylvan Advocate.
Yeah, preventing 6 damage at this point is probably more valuable than just getting a 1/2 plant off the table. Have some more clues.
Yeah, another Declaration in Stone. Brian Larter has not found time to sacrifice the first 2 clues he's gotten.
Declaration in Stone is a card that gets better in multiples, as you see here. The first couple of clues, well, Brian already has no time to crack those. So giving more clues is pretty much no downside at all at this stage of the game.
Brian elects for a 1/1 Hangerback Walker. Could have made it a 2/2. I think he's saving mana to sack clues. I mean, I guess he's representing what? Stasis Snare and Dromoka's Command?
Yes. Dromoka's Command doesn't really seem to do
it doesn't do anything
that much. Stasis Snare, well, if Brian has it, then he has it. But
the fact that I don't think he does, I probably would have sacked a clue main phase, because if you draw a land, then
Mhm.
you can play it and sack a second clue.
I agree.
Oh, he
is
does
a
have. He
good
does
point.
secure the waste. That's what he's doing with that mana.
And remember that the tokens are 2/2 due to the Gideon emblem, but that is still not going to be enough
Mhm.
power to
Still a
take
jump
down
off.
Sylvan Advocate in combat.
Is that another Avison off the top?
Yeah, this doesn't feel like the best use of Secure the Wastes here.
Mm-mm.
Sure, he got to use all of his mana on the previous turn, but he isn't really getting ahead on board.
Yeah, why not just
this
not
way.
play the hanger back? Make an extra pair of 2/2s off secure. Plus, you get the Avison flip trick if you want it later.
Mm.
All right, Oath of Nissa finds Gideon. Very flavorful.
Again, plenty of options here for Mike. He could just cast Gideon, make a token, or play some other cards. But, you know, when the opponent has 5 mana up, you always have to be wary of Archangel Avacyn. Mike just wants to see what's up first.
It's Archangel Avacyn. That's what's up.
Yep. And if that is the case, then you probably don't want to play a naked Gideon that you cannot protect against a Archangel Avacyn attack.
All right.
Much better to make your own
Oh,
Avacyn
yeah,
first,
yeah. Sure.
protecting the Sylvan Advocate from the block. Yep.
Okay, now what happens? Brian's Avacyn is bigger, thanks to his Gideon emblem.
Mm-hmm. So Brian can keep on attacking with his own Avacyn, pretty much unopposed, while blocking the Avacyn of Mike Segrist. Now, Mike has a Gideon in hand, which means that he could make an emblem of his own, and then...
So does Brian, though, right?
Yeah, Brian has another Gideon. That
I
would,
think
that
that's
would
his
work.
last card.
The preemptive emblem in order to make sure that my Avacyn stays bigger. Hey, it might be the right way to go here. The attack with the token, which could obviously be easily blocked. Brian just wants to transform his
Indeed.
Archangel Avacyn into a bigger size.
And Mike says, no, how about my creature dies instead of your creature dies? Interesting. Both guys just want their creatures to die. This is hilarious.
Yeah, this is some crazy blocking here. Yeah, you're attacking with a 2/2. Yeah, no problem. I'll block with a 1/2. You only see this when Archangel Avacyn gets involved. Although one point to note is that once she transforms to the other side, she no longer has Vigilance, which could turn out to be quite a relevant ability here.
All right, the last secure the waste soldier dies. Hanger back becomes a 2/2 as a response. So a pair of 2/2 Thopter tokens. Join Avacyn on Brian Larter's board.
If you're Mike Segrist, you will have some trouble going into a damage race. If you attack with your own Avacyn, then, well, Brian just jump blocks with a Thopter token, transforms his own Avacyn, and then probably gets ahead in the damage race. Although that Sylvan Advocate is 6 power and still pretty big. At the same time, you could also just make a Gideon and sit back with your Avacyn as a blocker. You could make Gideon to make an emblem. So many options with this deck.
There's the Gideon. And he goes straight for the emblem.
There seems to be a line, kind of a standard line for this kind of matchup. There's so many creatures that you get from tokens or whatnot that you want to beef up. Also making sure that your copies of a certain creature match up well against an opponent is huge as well. And it's hard to protect planeswalkers from dying against all these flyers. So just cashing in for the emblem right away is a fair line. So if Mike would attack with both of his creatures, Brian certainly has to block one of them at least in order to not die.
Yeah, I mean, he's got some gang blocks available that can kill Mike's creatures, but Brian will lose creatures as well. I mean, he can't take a creature down without risking Avacyn in combat.
And I think if Brian loses Avacyn at this stage of the game, Mike is perfectly happy with that because he has two huge monsters on the battlefield. If you're Brian, you have some routes to go. You could just chump block, say, Avacyn the Purifier with a Tapter token and go for a damage raise, right? The Avacyn transformation puts Mike down to 12 on the next turn. You attack with, say, your own Avacyn, which threatens to be lethal on the next attack, which means that Mike cannot attack with his own Avacyn on the next turn if he needs to keep back a flying blocker. Trying to go for the gang block doesn't seem so
he goes
appealing.
chump. Takes 0 damage and sets his Avacyn up to flip.
Yep. Yeah, obviously, if you go for one chump, you have to jump with both because
it's going to die to the
transform.
Flip the trigger anyway.
Exactly.
Oh, Mike's not done.
Yeah, he still has another Gideon in hand. And, well, some options here. Getting another emblem might not be super valuable, because a 2 emblem Avacyn the Purifier still trades for a 1 emblem Avacyn the Purifier. Making a token is, well, obviously useless because it's going to die to the Avacyn transformation. But having a Gideon around as a potential attacker on the next turn, that Brian can certainly attack with Avacyn, but then you save some life points, which is relevant. Could also work. But no, these players always just go for the Gideon emblem. It might just be the way to approach this matchup. So Mike has no cards in hand, no clues on the battlefield. So if you're Brian, you're playing with nearly perfect information. If Brian attacks with Avacyn the Purifier, then, and Mike draws, say, just a land, then Mike cannot attack with his own Avacyn the Purifier on the next turn. He needs to keep that one back as a blocker.
Why? Aren't his 2 creatures adding up to lethal? Brian has to do more than just attack with Avacyn. You're assuming Brian's going to play a blocker of some kind.
Yes, I am. So if Brian plays a blocker for the Sylvan Advocate, then Brian is in no danger of dying to the swing back from Mike. And by attacking now, you put Mike down to 5 and you force Avacyn the Purifier to stay back on defense. In this sense, the attack is the best defense.
Oh, he's going to use Declaration in Stone to kill the Avacyn.
That is pretty good too.
Yeah, now Brian is set up to win next turn.
Yes. Mike has 2 draws, one from his draw step and one from the clue, in order to find either a removal spell for Avacyn the Purifier or a flying blocker. I don't think there is a sequence of draws that can allow him to deal 13 damage on this turn. That Sylvan Advocate is big, but not that big.
Can Mike Segrist stop Avacyn the Purifier from killing him? That is the question.
So far it looks like the answer is no. So if Mike just plays his cards here, then Brian knows that the coast is clear. Maybe Mike should have just passed the turn with a bunch of mana up to at least bluff Archangel Avacyn. Maybe dissuade Brian from attacking.
I think he's hoping Nissa will distract Avacyn the Purifier. That Avacyn might want to kill Nissa instead of Mike Segrist.
When Mike is at 5 life, that seems unlikely.
Look, he just had to figure out what's the most convincing bluff he could represent.
Fair enough. It's worth the try, for sure. But Brian didn't fall for it.
Right.
Just
It's like
wait.
you can dangle the distracting planeswalker
Yeah.
in front of him, or you can leave up Avacyn mana.
It's bait, but not as tasty as just winning the game.
Right. Brian was not distracted, and we're on to game 3.
So far, this matchup seems to revolve largely around Archangel Avacyn and indeed the Planeswalkers. Mostly the emblems from Gideon. They were
Well, Siggy was up 2
quite
emblems
huge.
to 1. That didn't really win that game for him.
It didn't end up being the decisive point, but we still saw at a certain point where Brian had a 5/5 Archangel Avacyn
Yep.
versus a 4/4 Archangel Avacyn on Mike's side of the board. When you're playing a mirror match,
Yeah, that was briefly relevant. I mean, look, for me, I thought the match was decided by the Declaration of Stone. I mean, Brian got to kill Mike's Avacyn. Mike did not have the ability to kill Brian's. So, I
Yep.
mean, you could say it's decided by Avacyn advantage. You could say it's decided by Declaration of Stone. Just depends how you want to count. But I think Avacyn superiority is going to trump Emblem superiority.
I think you're right.
And if it is about Avacyn superiority, that's where your evolutionary leap strategy might actually be pretty good here. Both players, I believe, have one in the main, one on the board. No, Brian took his out of the main deck. Does still have one on the board, but Siggy has access to 2, if that's how he wants to play it.
And if it does come down to Avacyn superiority, then indeed this Declaration in Stone can help you cement that.
Right.
One way or another, if you have a good curve in this matchup, like a 2-drop into some Planeswalkers, that's always a fine place to start. If your opponent can easily transform Archangel Avacyn, then you may be on the receiving side of a one-sided blowout. But as long as you have either, say, an Archangel Avacyn of your own to give your creatures indestructible, or a way to deal with the opposing Archangel Avacyn via a removal spell, then you can prevent that style of blowout. We haven't really seen huge creature stalls either in this matchup. I would imagine that when you have decks with so many Planeswalkers that can generate a token every turn, you might see a true lockdown on the ground. But it hasn't really been happening yet. So far it's just been a bunch of big creatures rumbling together, made even bigger by the Planeswalkers. I don't think we've even seen a Night token at all come down.
Yeah, they go straight for the emblem.
Yeah.
1 round left after this one here on day 1 of Grand Prix Toronto. Both these players are safely through to day 2 for sure, but it's just a question of how good a shape are they going to be in when they come back tomorrow.
Yeah, this is the type of situation where you shouldn't really think of, okay, I made day 2,
Right.
got my goal for the day locked up, now I can just sit back and relax. No, the matches that you play here are still super important, because any win gets you closer towards the coveted top 8.
No 2-drop for Siggy. No 2-drop for Brian.
And no third land.
Third land for Siggy.
Uh-oh. Yeah, it's those dreaded 2-landers that when you look them, when you see them as your opening hand, you think, well, 2 lands, 5 spells, it's okay. I can expect to draw a third land in time, but you don't always do that. And that is an unfortunate position to be in.
Has to discard.
While Brian has nearly the dream start with a turn 3 Nissa, and now There may be a Gideon coming down, and I don't think it's going to make an emblem immediately this time around.
No, this looks like Knight Ally time.
Yeah, Siggy really needs to draw a land right here to get back.
He did.
Okay, so that's a start.
It doesn't make green, though. Can't play Nissa.
He does have Stasis Snare. You know, if Brian decides to attack with Gideon, that Gideon may be taken out by the Stasis Snare. Let's see if Brian decides to play around that or not. Stasis Snare is not a 4-off in these types of decks, typically only 1 or 2 copies.
It seems like there's more here at the GP than there were last weekend at the Pro Tour.
So if you can really sniff out the Stasis Snare here, if you're Brian, you don't activate Gideon to make it into a creature. You just make another Knight ally and
Indeed.
attack with a bunch of tokens, pass.
Always going for emblem.
Ah, that also works. That's another way to play around the Stasis Snare. One way or another, don't make Gideon to a creature. Well, Brian perfectly played against that Stasis Snare here.
Yeah, Stasis Snare forced to just take out a Knight token. Five mana, nothing to do, Brian Larter?
Very suspicious, as always.
No, fourth land for Siggy. Looks like our player of the year is going to pick up his first loss there this weekend. Looks like Brian Larter is going to go to 8-0.
Most likely indeed. Mike is holding a hand filled with Dromoka's commands that don't really do much. Gideons, they're just going to come down too late. Maybe he has a removal spell for the Archangel Avacyn. That would be a start. But at this point, the creatures are getting so big. The plants are getting so angry. Already 3 power plants. So many lethal attackers here.
There's the handshake. Brian Larter goes to 8-0. 2-1 victory. He defeats Mike Segrist. Siggy still in good shape at 7-1, but he was in better shape half an hour ago.
Yeah, and we also found the key towards the green-white matchup. Just make sure that you draw some lands.
Well, more Avacyns.
And
Again,
Avacyn's.
it was Avacyn superiority there at the end. Well, Mike's was trapped in his hand. A little bit of turbo here. Fabrizio and Terry. Is he good at the Grand Prix level?
He might be. It's typical when you have a GP and you weren't really able to follow it. If someone asks you who won the GP, just answer Fabrizio and Terry. It's right most of the time.
It has been right 5 times in the last couple of years. 10 top 8s, 5 wins, including 2 weeks ago in Barcelona.
And he's also playing the adjusted band company deck
Right,
list.
so this is
that
the
we, saw.
Team Eureka Bant company we saw a little bit earlier today.
Yep, with tweaks of Eldrazi Sky Spawner, Eldrazi Displacer, and more copies of Archangel Avacyn. Instead of some Bounding Crazes and some spells.
Brian Liu, meanwhile, appears to be on Mono White Humans. Brian is the 2014 Grand Prix Richmond winner. These guys are 6-1, by the way. They both have 1 loss each coming into this round.
So Brian seems to be building up a huge board of of humans here.
Indeed. Fabrizio's going to double block Anafenza, so able to trade off 1 advocate for Anafenza. He'll take that trade here. Just wants to stabilize. Try to find like a collected company to get enough value onto the table to catch up.
Yeah, he also has some Eldrazi Sky Spawners in hand. Those are nice when the white weenie deck just has a bunch of X1 creatures, all the 2-1s for instance, but not once they have been boosted by Thalia's Lieutenant.
All right, Fabrizio is able to flip a Jace, but ticks it up. Nothing saucy in the graveyard to flashback. Sky Spawner comes down. And yeah, I mean, he's got creatures. He's not going to get killed right now. But Brian's creatures are just bigger and better.
Brian is also not playing the
he's not mono
white humans. He's splashing blue for Reflector Mage and supposedly some cards like Negate or Dragonlord Ojitai in the sideboard.
2 copies of Reflector Mage in Brian's hand, I think I saw. But no blue mana.
Yep. Yeah, that is always the downside of splashing color. Sure, you may be able to get a mana base where you have the blue mana 80% of the time or maybe even 90% of the time. But sometimes you'll just be stuck with some uncastable cards in hand. There are risks in everything in Magic.
All right. Another double block allows Fritio to trade an Advocate for a bigger creature. Jace soaks up some damage for the team, stays alive. Now here's Eldrazi Displacer. And there's enough mana to activate it by sacking a Scion.
Yeah, then you can blink an Eldrazi Sky Spawner that was blocking perhaps.
Right.
Get another Scion out of the deal.
I mean, this is block, sack the Scion, blink the Sky Spawner, right?
Yeah, you're not really getting ahead.
But you're not falling behind, which,
exactly.
Turn 5 against the humans deck, the plan is to just not fall behind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is doing it admirably. Just needs 2 lands along with an Eldrazi Sky Spawner and a Scion token, and you can just hold 2 creatures at bay. That's not too bad.
Attacks. New Sky Spawner. Again, there's that Yamamaya Coast to make the colorless mana. This is cute. Yeah, Brian Liu has seen enough. Declaration in Stone. Targets Eldrazi Displacer.
Yeah, that's
none of that.
Definitely the right target here. It might seem perhaps a bit appealing to play Declaration in Stone to get rid of 2 Eldrazi Sky Spawners. But if he had done that, then the Sky Spawner would just be blinked in response and the Declaration would be countered. Eldrazi Displacer cannot blink itself, so that loop is now gone.
Fabrizio greedily sacks the clue. Can he stitch a defense back together again? Still attacking with Sky Spawner, so obviously not. Doesn't feel like he's under too much pressure.
Oh, but he is.
He's under a lot of pressure.
He just sees that at this point, well, all of his creatures are smaller than Brian's. So the way he can win this game is pretty much only by racing, which means attacking in the air and hoping it somehow works out. But Brian is certainly in the driver's seat in this game.
Always watching. Team is now even bigger and now vigilant.
Yeah, there don't really seem to be great blocks here. Yeah, the smallest creature that Brian has is going to be the Thalia's Lieutenant. That's already a 3/3. You have to double block that. Ugh.
So he's going to make chump blocks with the non-flyers?
That's at least a game plan. Saying, okay, well, if I start to trade here, I'm just not going to win the game. I just have to hope that somehow I can find some tempo cards, maybe a Collected Company into a Reflector Mage, while attacking you with my Sky Spawners in the air.
Recruiter survived? Isn't that Thraben Inspector 3 power?
I presume that it didn't actually end up blocking.
Okay.
Because if it had, it would have died in the process.
Oh, Jace must have ticked up. That's what it was. It was a 1 power Thraben Inspector because Jace had ticked up.
Ah, okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
So 6 power in the air. Recruiter flips after recruiting. Oh, here's Collected Company. Wow. Fabrizio finds a Jace and a Recruiter.
Not bad. The racing plan is working so far.
All right, he's able to trade for the Lieutenant. Recruiter bounces off the Thraben Inspector that Jace shrank, and Fabrizio may actually win this race in the air, and he does!
That's enough, wow.
What a great game Fabrizio and Terry just played.
Yeah, I think the key here was realizing the way he could get to victory, which was not trading. If he had started to trade his creatures...
Yeah, he didn't hesitate. He started attacking with those Sky Spawners right away.
Exactly. And by not trading, by keeping those sky spawners around, going for a damage race rather than a control game, that is how he ended up winning this one.
Whew, that was
You just have
great.
to realize what kind of game you're in.
That is not easy to figure out. At the point where he figured it out,
Hmm.
it felt like, oh, he's the slower control deck. He's just kind of stabilizing, and then he can turn the corner later. But
Typically,
no, he never actually stabilized. Just chump on the ground and fly over with sky spawners.
that is indeed typically the role that Band Company plays of being the control deck, but sometimes, the game is different than what you had anticipated.
Apparently, even more so with the displacers and the sky spawners, and like you
Yep.
had sky spawner running, displacer running for what? 2 triggers? I think you got to do that 2
Yeah.
turns before Declaration broke it up.
Not more than that, for sure.
Wow, and now a couple of turns and a whole bunch of creatures for Brian Liu.
But that Lamphold Pacifist is keeping almost all of them at bay.
Guy blocks. That's his job. That's what it's in the deck for, right?
Yep.
Is to block in exactly this matchup.
And it does that job admirably. Now it's a Lamphold Butcher. 4/4, an even better blocker. Yeah, this is a strong tempo play. Oh, wow. So what Fabrizio was hoping was that he would hit Reflector Mage off of the Collected Company. Then he would be able to bounce the pumped Incited Rebel, still keep his Lamphold Butcher around. Well, he didn't, so they trade. But at least Brian had to spend 2 of his mana on
Right.
pumping the Incited Rebel, which meant that Brian was not able to use that mana to develop his board. And that is quite important.
Declaration straight away targets Eldrazi Displacer. And here's the second Collected Company. This time he does find a Reflector Mage, along with a Sky Spawner.
Yeah, this board is getting clogged up with both players likely not able to get in for great attacks, except for that
Except for the
Eldrazi
guy
Sky
with the
Spawner.
flyers.
Yep.
The Sky Spawner's doing so much work here, Frank.
Yep.
Why has nobody else played this in their Band Company lists?
I think people cut it once they saw that Wingmate Rock was rotating out.
Okay.
Eldrazi Sky Spawner into attack and then turn 4 Wingmate Rock was a powerful play. Without Wingmate Rock, I think many people figured that Eldrazi Sky Spawner is just not going to be good enough.
Mm-hmm.
But if many games will revolve around creatures, and you see this is a huge creature stall where probably none of the players have any good attacks. There are high toughness creatures on both sides of the board, so
Right.
the defender will always have the advantage. Having some kind of evasion with a simple Eldrazi Sky Spawner can be huge in breaking up these kinds of board stalls.
Or Fabrizio's get Tireless Tracker going now, too. He should just win from here, right?
Well, he has the late game locked up. As long as that Tireless Tracker sticks around, he also has a 4/5 Sylvan Advocate, which means that he has
Oh,
excellent
jeez.
blockers. Now Eldrazi Displacer to get value, to protect his creatures.
He's got a waste to activate it with.
Yep, can set up some fun Reflector Mage loops, perhaps.
All right,
Dragon
Dragon
Lord
Lord Ojutai.
Ojutai, that might change things around.
It's not nothing.
Although mostly on the blocking side of things. Because if Brian attacks with Dragon Lord Ojutai, then Fabrizio can just say, okay, I'll blink my Reflector Mage with Eldrazi Displacer, bounce your Dragon Lord Ojutai. But as long as Ojutai stays on the defense, it is pretty powerful. Also, if Brian adds Always Watching to the board, then Dragon Lord Ojutai will retain Hexproof even while attacking, which is a powerful combination.
There we go.
Fabrizio can still jump block in a way with Eldrazi Sky Spawner, such that Brian does not get a trigger, and then blink the Sky Spawner as we see here. So Brian is not really getting ahead, but this does lock up 3 mana on Fabrizio's side of the board that he kind of has to invest every turn. Until
3 mana and his only recurrent colorless mana.
Mhm.
Ooh, Dramoka's Command. Just kills Kithian.
Well, and the always watching, that's gone.
Ah, yes.
So now Dragonlord Ojitai cannot really keep on attacking unopposed.
Second colorless source now for Fabrizio, too. The Yavimaya Ghost. So Displacer can blink twice a turn now. Yeah, Brian just has to leave Ojitai on defense.
You know, we tested a similar deck to this in testing, which also had Cryptolith Ride. Can you imagine having a Cryptolith Ride at this stage? You know, tap all your guys. Yeah, blink here, tap some more mana, blink there, blink here, get some more value, a
that
trigger.
Sounds like the 4-color deck, 4.5 color company deck that Seth Manfield's playing this weekend.
Yeah, it's somewhat similar indeed. Now, obviously, this is the type of situation where you are already pretty far ahead. If you're Fabrizio, you don't really need Cryptolith Ride. That's just for fun.
No, Tireless Tracker was at the point where it could attack into Ojitai, but Archangel Avacyn might have a little something to say about that. Fabrizio can blink it. Oh, he's going to use Dromoka's command to kill Avacyn as a response to her indestructible trigger. And now, sure, Ojitai's indestructible. He can block Tireless Tracker, but the tracker will survive that combat.
Well, not if Brian blocks with all of his creatures. That's still a lot of power that he can line up in front of the Tireless Tracker. The Fabrizio can always just blink his own Tireless Tracker in order to save it. But then it does shrink down to, well, an old school 3/2 size.
Maybe you just can't. Okay. So he blinks Reflector Mage.
And then blinks it again, such that there's only a Dragonlord Ojitai still blocking the Tireless Tracker. And then the tracker didn't die. That worked.
All right, the Gossip Mongers come back down.
Yeah, it looks like right now Brian is a bit out of gas.
Oh,
he did his best and spent his resources in order to get through Fabrizio's side of the board with that Archangel Avacyn, but Fabrizio just had a couple blinks and a Dromoka's command in order to deal with it. Fabrizio is certainly in the driver's seat.
Yeah, now it's just a matter of doing math. Ojitai's tapped, where it can be bounced. Flicker,
blink that, attack with everything, no blockers anymore.
Fabrizio and Terry, ladies and gentlemen. Deck looked great. Fabrizio seemed in total command of it. 2-0 win here moves Fabrizio and Terry up to 7-1. So that's what, 3 buys and then a 4-1? On pace. On pace to take up his normal spot in the top 8 at the end of tomorrow.
I have been impressed with Eldrazi Displacer in these games.
Well, that is going to do it for round 8 here at Grand Prix Toronto.
Qualify for the next Pro Tour on Magic Online. Go 5-0 or 4-1 in a preliminary to advance to the finals. You can see the full schedule at mtgo.com.
Hello and welcome back to the booth. I'm now being joined